I reckon I probably hold the world record for the most heavily armed police response to a private car sale. And all because our HOA president, a woman whose personality was as tastefully curated as her leopard print velour tracksuit, decided my Audi S5 was, in fact, her Audi S5. Drop a comment below if you've ever had an HOA story that made you question the sanity of your neighbors. I'm betting this one will make your jaw drop. Stick around, because you are not going to believe the sheer, unadulterated audacity, or how it all spectacularly imploded. My name is Mark, and by trade, I'm a contracts lawyer. This means I'm pathologically meticulous. I read the fine print on cereal boxes, and my idea of a fun Saturday night occasionally involves reorganizing my digital filing system. It's a skill set that, as it turns in, is surprisingly effective in suburban warfare. The car in question was my 2018 Audi S5 Sportback, Navara Blue Metallic, black leather interior, Bang Olufsen sound system, my pride and joy for 3 glorious, trouble-free years. But life changes, priorities shift, and I'd recently acquired a classic Land Rover Defender that was demanding more of my attention and garage space. Reluctantly, I decided it was time to let the Audi go to a new home. I polished it until it gleamed like a sapphire under showroom lights, took about 50 high-resolution photos, and wrote an ad so detailed it could have doubled as the car's autobiography. I listed it on a reputable auto enthusiast site, priced fairly, expecting a smooth transaction. Oh, the naivety. Within a couple of days, I got a promising inquiry from a fellow named David. He sounded knowledgeable, asked all the right questions, and wasn't trying to lowball me into oblivion. We agreed he'd come by on a Saturday morning to inspect the car at my house. My house, mind you, situated in a quiet cul-de-sac governed by the iron fist of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association and its undisputed queen, Brenda McTavish. Brenda, picture, if you will, a woman who seemed to be perpetually auditioning for a role as a reality TV villain. Mid-50s, with a brassy blonde helmet of hair that looked like it could deflect small arms fire, a fondness for chunky gold jewelry that jangled like wind chimes in a hurricane, and a wardrobe that screamed, "Money talks, but taste whispers," from a locked basement. Her vehicle of choice was a gleaming white Cadillac Escalade, invariably parked with at least one tire on the curb, as if the normal rules of physics and parking etiquette simply didn't apply to her. She ruled the HOA not with an iron fist in a velvet glove, but with an iron fist in an iron glove, possibly with spikes. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I pulled the Audi out of the garage and onto the driveway, giving it one last affectionate wipe down with a microfiber cloth. David arrived on time, a pleasant, normal-looking guy in his late 30s. He was clearly an enthusiast, his eyes lighting up as he circled the S5. We were chatting about horsepower and maintenance schedules, him peering into the engine bay, me pointing out the pristine condition of the brake calipers, when the Escalade of Doom rumbled into view. Brenda didn't so much park as she asserted her Escalade onto the street opposite my driveway, angling it in a way that felt less like parking and more like establishing a naval blockade. She emerged, resplendent in a turquoise tracksuit that shimmered with an alarming intensity in the morning sun, her gold chains glinting. "Mark," she began, her voice carrying the clarion call of impending doom, "what is all this?" I plastered on my most patient, neighborly smile. "Morning, Brenda. This is David. He's here to take a look at my Audi. I'm selling it." Brenda's eyes, narrowed under meticulously plucked and penciled brows, swept over David with the kind of disdain usually reserved for discovering a slug in one's salad. "Selling it? Here? In the driveway? Mark, you know the rules about conducting commercial enterprises from residential properties." I blinked. "Brenda, I'm selling my personal car. It's not a commercial enterprise. It's a car sale. People do it all the time." My internal contract lawyer was already highlighting the vagueness and probable unenforceability of such a rule, if it even existed for this context. "It looks very commercial to me," she sniffed, her gaze lingering on David, as if he were attempting to sell black market kidneys instead of admiring a German sports sedan. David, to his credit, just looked confused, shifting his weight awkwardly. Well, it's not, I said, keeping my tone level. David's just taking a look. Brenda took a step closer, her eyes fixing on the Audi. Her expression shifted from general disapproval to a strange, almost predatory gleam. That's a very nice car, she said, her voice dropping a register. A very nice car indeed. She circled it slowly, like a shark sizing up a particularly plump seal. Then she stopped, pointed a finger tipped with a blood-red acrylic nail directly at the hood, and declared, "Actually, that's my car." David and I exchanged a look that I imagine mirrored the expressions of people witnessing a particularly baffling magic trick. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed. "That's my Audi," Brenda stated, her voice rising in volume and conviction. "It was stolen from me about a year ago. I recognize it. That little scratch on the passenger side door handle." I glanced at the passenger side door handle. It was, like the rest of the car, immaculate. Not a scratch, not a scuff, not a hint of imperfection. My detailing obsession ensured that. "Brenda," I said slowly and clearly, "this is my car. I bought it new from Audi of Pleasantville 3 years ago. I have the title, the registration, all the paperwork. There is no scratch on the door handle." "You're lying!" she shrieked, her face flushing an alarming shade of puce that clashed spectacularly with her turquoise tracksuit. "You probably stole it from me and had it repainted to cover up the evidence. What are you doing with my car, you thief?" She whirled on David. "And you? You're trying to buy stolen property." David, bless his heart, looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. "Ma'am, I just answered an ad." "Don't ma'am me, you accomplice." Brenda was now fully dialed up to 11. She whipped out a jewel-encrusted smartphone from a pocket in her tracksuit. "I'm calling the police. I'm calling 911. There are 2 men here trying to steal my car and sell it right in front of my face." My mind raced. This was beyond HOA overreach. This was weapons-grade delusion. "Brenda, put the phone down," I said, trying to inject a note of calm authority into my voice, the kind I used when explaining complex contractual clauses to agitated clients. "You're making a very serious and entirely false accusation. This car is legally mine. I have all the proof." "Proof? Your proof is probably forged," she screeched, already stabbing at her phone screen. "Operator? Yes. I need the police immediately. There are 2 men in my neighborhood, Willow Creek Estates, at 12 Serenity Lane, attempting to abscond with my stolen vehicle. Yes, my Audi's 5. They're very aggressive. Hurry!" I could only stare, dumbfounded. Aggressive? I was standing there with my hands open. David looked like he was about to faint, and she was the one vibrating with incandescent rage. The absurdity was breathtaking. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was a 5-alarm fire of fabricated felony. And as Brenda dramatically clicked off her phone, a smug, triumphant look plastered on her face, I heard the faint, but rapidly approaching, wail of sirens. My Saturday morning car sale had officially gone off the rails and straight into the twilight zone. The sirens grew louder, culminating in the arrival of not 1, but 2 police cruisers, lights flashing, bathing the tranquil cul-de-sac in strobes of blue and red. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, began to peek out from behind curtains, their weekend tranquility shattered. Brenda, meanwhile, launched into full victim mode, rushing towards the first officer out of his car, a young, stern-faced patrolman. "Officer, thank heavens. They're trying to steal my car, that blue Audi, it's mine," she wailed, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at me and David. I took a deep breath. My lawyer brain, which had been momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity, clicked back into gear. Rule number 1. Stay calm. Be factual. David, standing beside me, looked pale and utterly bewildered, like a man who'd wandered into a play without knowing his lines. The second officer, older, more seasoned, with a weary look that suggested he'd seen his fair share of suburban melodramas, approached us more cautiously. "All right, folks. What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes scanning me. Then David. Then the Audi. "Officer," I began, keeping my voice steady. My name is Mark Stetson. This is my property. I reside at this address. I gestured to my house. This is my vehicle, a 2018 Audi S5. I am in the process of selling it to this gentleman, David. I indicated David, who nodded mutely, who responded to my online advertisement. Brenda, overhearing this, shrieked, "He's lying! It's my car! He stole it! I can describe it perfectly. It has a custom gearshift knob I installed myself." I glanced at my gearshift. Standard Audi S-Tronic. Of course. "Ma'am, please let me handle this," the older officer said, holding up a hand to Brenda without looking at her. He turned back to me. "Sir, do you have ownership documents for the vehicle?" "Absolutely," I replied. "Registration, insurance, and the certificate of title are all in my glove compartment, in my name, matching my driver's license, which I also have. The VIN on the documents matches the VIN on the car. Naturally, I retrieved my wallet. Here's my license." He examined it, then nodded. "Okay, let's see the vehicle documents." As I walked to the Audi, Brenda continued her tirade to the younger officer. "He's probably got forged papers. He's very clever, that one. Always been a bit shifty, if you ask me. I've had my eye on him." This was news to me. I barely interacted with Brenda beyond a curt nod at the mailbox. I returned with the requested documents: the California title in my name, my current registration card, my insurance declaration page. All pristine, all clearly showing my name, my address, and the Audi's VIN. The officer took them, his expression unreadable, and began comparing the VIN on the paperwork to the one visible on the dashboard plate and the sticker on the driver's side door jamb. They matched, of course. He then ran my license and the car's plates through his system. While he was occupied, Brenda was still at it, her voice escalating. "He probably paid someone at the DMV to get those fake papers. This has been a nightmare. I love that car. It had sentimental value. He even had the audacity to list it for sale, knowing I live right here." The sheer performative anguish was Oscar-worthy. The older officer handed my documents back. "Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Stetson. The vehicle is registered to you at this address. No reports of it being stolen." He then gave Brenda a long, tired look. "Ma'am, this car is legally registered to this gentleman. Do you have any documentation whatsoever? A title? A previous registration? A police report from when your car was allegedly stolen that would identify this specific vehicle as yours?" Brenda sputtered. "Well, I reported it stolen. Of course I did. To the main police station downtown. They must have the records. It was a blue Audi, just like this one." She waved a dismissive hand. "Details, details. The important thing is, it's my car." "Ma'am," the officer said, his patience visibly fraying, "a blue Audi is not specific enough. We need a vehicle identification number, a license plate from your alleged previous ownership of this car. Without that, based on the documentation Mr. Stetson has provided, this is his vehicle." "But the scratch," she insisted, then, perhaps realizing I'd already pointed out its absence, quickly added, "Or maybe it was a dent, a small dent on the rear bumper, right under the taillight." I mentally scanned the Audi's flawless rear. Nope. The younger officer, who had been listening with a deepening frown, finally spoke to Brenda. "Ma'am, we can't just take your word for it when all the legal documentation points to Mr. Stetson. If you believe this is a civil dispute over property, that's a matter for the courts, not a 911 emergency call for a car theft in progress." He paused, then added pointedly, "Misusing the 911 system is a serious offense." Brenda's face fell. The triumphant gleam in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by a sullen pout. "Well, I am the president of this homeowners association. I am trying to protect this community from criminals. And we appreciate citizens looking out for their community," the older officer said, his tone making it clear he didn't appreciate this particular citizen's efforts. "But in this instance, there's no evidence of a crime being committed by Mr. Stetson or this other gentleman. We're satisfied this is Mr. Stetson's vehicle." He gave me a nod. "Sorry for the disturbance, sir. To David, he said, "You're free to go about your business." David, however, looked like his business appetite had completely vanished. As the police cruisers pulled away, leaving a wake of bewildered neighbors and a fuming Brenda, he turned to me, shaking his head. "Man, I am so sorry, but this is just too much drama for me. I think I'm going to pass. Good luck with everything." And with that, he made a hasty retreat, practically jogging back to his own car. I couldn't blame him. I stood there, watching him go, a potent cocktail of fury, frustration, and sheer disbelief churning in my gut. Brenda, defeated for the moment but still radiating malice, shot me a venomous glare. "This isn't over, Mark Stetson," she hissed, before flouncing back to her Escalade and roaring off, this time managing to take a small chunk out of the curb as she went. It wasn't over. I knew she was right about that. This woman was clearly unhinged, and now she had a vendetta. My quiet Saturday had not only lost me a car sale, but had also apparently initiated a feud with a suburban despot. I went inside, the pristine Audi documents clutched in my hand, and my mind immediately began to strategize. Brenda had escalated this from a neighborhood nuisance to something verging on harassment and defamation. As a lawyer, I knew one thing. When someone declares war, you don't just sit there. You prepare your case, meticulously. The first thing I did, after making a strong cup of coffee, was to download the footage from my security cameras. I had excellent coverage of my driveway and the street in front. The entire fiasco, Brenda's arrival, her increasingly unhinged accusations, her dramatic 911 call, the arrival of the police, her subsequent deflation, was all captured in crystal clear HD, complete with audio. It was, if nothing else, a masterclass in how to self-destruct with baseless confidence. This footage was gold. Next, I pulled up the Willow Creek Estates HOA governing documents, the CC, Rs, bylaws, and any published rules and regulations. I'd given them a cursory read when I bought the house, of course, but now I scrutinized them with a lawyer's eye. Was there anything at all, about selling personal vehicles? There were clauses about commercial vehicle parking, running a business from home, defined as something causing undue traffic or nuisance, like a daycare or a busy contractor's office, and general property upkeep. Nothing prohibited the private sale of a personal car by a resident. Brenda's claim about commercial enterprise was, as I suspected, pure fabrication designed to assert authority where she had none. Then I started thinking about Brenda herself. I decided to have a quiet chat with a few of my more reasonable neighbors. I started with old Mr. Henderson from across the street, a retired engineer who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. He listened patiently, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Brenda," he said, shaking his head. "She's a piece of work, that one. Been HOA president for 5 years now, ever since poor Martha Jenkins moved to Florida." Martha was sensible. Brenda thinks this neighborhood is her personal fiefdom. You're not the first to have a run-in, Mark. Just the most spectacular, shall we say." He recounted a few minor skirmishes. Brenda measuring someone's lawn with a ruler to ensure it met the exact 2.5-inch height requirement. Brenda demanding someone repaint their front door because she felt the shade of blue was too jaunty for the neighborhood's aesthetic. Small potatoes compared to grand theft auto accusations, but it painted a picture of escalating petty tyranny. My most valuable conversation, however, was with Mrs. Gable, a sweet elderly lady who lived 2 doors down. She was an avid gardener and often outside. When I recounted the incident, her eyes widened. "Oh, dear Mark, that's dreadful. That woman, you know," she leaned in conspiratorially, "she's always admired your Audi. Too much if you ask me. Just last month, I saw her standing on the sidewalk, just staring at it while you were out. When she saw me looking, she sort of huffed and said, 'A car like that is wasted on some people. It really should belong to someone who appreciates its status.' I thought it was an odd thing to say at the time. Status, that clicked. For Brenda, it wasn't about the car itself, perhaps, as much as what it represented. And the idea that I had it, and she, the Queen of Willow Creek, didn't, or didn't anymore, if her stolen car story had any basis in a different car, probably chafed her ego raw. Mrs. Gable's comment was another piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just a random delusion, it was an entitled, covetous delusion. A few days later, the official HOA envelope arrived in my mailbox. My heart sank a little. Inside, on impressively thick letterhead adorned with a slightly off-center clip art image of a willow tree, was a formal notice of violation. It cited, violation of Article 4, Section 2, unauthorized commercial activity on residential property, attempted sale of vehicle, and, my personal favorite, violation of Article 7, Section 5, creating a public nuisance, summons of emergency services for a dispute initiated by homeowner. They were actually trying to fine me for Brenda, calling the cops on me with a bogus claim. The sheer, unmitigated gall was breathtaking. The notice was signed, with a flourish that looked like a seismograph reading during an earthquake, by Brenda McTavish, President, Willow Creek Estates HOA. This was no longer just about a crazy lady. The HOA board, by issuing this notice, was formally endorsing her actions. They were complicit. My polite, neighborly approach was clearly not going to cut it. It was time to draft a response, not as Mark the neighbor, but as Mark Stetson, attorney at law. And I knew this response needed to be more than just a strongly worded letter. It needed to be a precision strike. I also recontacted David, the erstwhile buyer. I apologized profusely for the circus he'd been dragged into. He was surprisingly understanding, though still wary. Look, man, I get it. Not your fault she's nuts. If you get this sorted, and you're still selling, maybe give me a call. But I'm not coming back if she's anywhere within a 5-mile radius. I asked if he'd be willing to provide a written statement about what he witnessed, specifically Brenda's accusations and her 911 call. After a moment's thought, he agreed. Another piece of evidence secured. My case was building brick by painstaking brick. Brenda thought she was playing checkers. She had no idea I was setting up a very complex chessboard. My first official salvo was a meticulously drafted letter, sent via certified mail with return receipt requested, addressed to Brenda McTavish and each individual member of the Willow Creek Estates HOA Board of Directors. It was polite, professional, and utterly uncompromising. I began by formally refuting each alleged violation, citing the specific or lack of specific clauses in the CCRs. I pointed out that the private sale of a personal vehicle did not constitute commercial activity under any reasonable interpretation of their own governing documents or applicable state law. Regarding the public nuisance charge, I icily noted that the only nuisance created was by Miss McTavish herself, through her false accusations, her histrionic behavior, and her blatant misuse of the 911 emergency system, a fact the responding officers had implicitly noted. I attached copies of my vehicle title, registration, and the original bill of sale from Audi of Pleasantville, highlighting my undisputed ownership. I also included a transcript of the relevant sections of my security camera footage, noting that the full video and audio were preserved and available upon request. David's signed witness statement, and a polite but firm reminder of the legal definitions of slander, defamation, and tortious interference with a contract, my aborted sale to David. I concluded by demanding an immediate written retraction of the bogus violation notice, a formal apology from Miss McTavish and the board for the harassment and reputational damage, and an assurance that Miss McTavish would cease all further interference and baseless accusations. I gave them 10 business days to comply. The response, when it came, was almost comical in its inadequacy. It was a short, dismissive letter, not even on the official HOA letterhead this time, signed by a board member named Gary, who I vaguely recalled as one of Brenda's chief sycophants, a man whose primary contribution to meetings seemed to be nodding vigorously whenever Brenda spoke. The letter essentially stated that the board had full confidence in President McTavish's judgment, and that they considered the matter closed although they would graciously hold the fines in abeyance pending further review, which I translated as, "We know we're on shaky ground, but we're too scared of Brenda to admit it." This weak-kneed enabling was precisely what I expected from a board clearly under Brenda's thumb. It was time to dig deeper, to find something that would not just exonerate me, but expose Brenda so thoroughly that even her staunchest allies couldn't ignore it. I kept coming back to Mrs. Gable's comment about Brenda admiring my car, and Brenda's own shrieked claim about her stolen Audi. There was a missing piece here. I decided to do some open-source intelligence gathering. It's amazing what you can find with a bit of patience and a few targeted search queries. I searched local police blotters online for any reports of a stolen blue Audi in the last couple of years connected to Brenda's name or address. Nothing immediately jumped out under McTavish, but then I tried variations and cross-referenced with local social media groups for our town. Old posts sometimes linger. I remembered Brenda mentioning at a particularly tedious HOA meeting about paint colors last year that she'd had a terrible run of luck, what with my lovely car being stolen and all. Then a thought struck me. Insurance. People who have valuable cars stolen usually file substantial insurance claims. These things sometimes leave faint digital breadcrumbs. I focused my search on public records, anything related to vehicle theft claims in our county. It was a long shot. But then, I stumbled upon an archived news snippet from a local paper's website, a small human interest piece from about 18 months prior, detailing a minor spate of car thefts in a neighboring, more affluent community. One of the victims quoted, lamenting the loss of her customized Audi A5 coupe, was a Brenda M. from Willow Creek. The description was vague, but the Brenda M. and Willow Creek were too coincidental. An A5 coupe, not an S5 Sportback. Similar, but distinctly different. This was interesting. Very interesting. The detail about it being customized also echoed her bizarre claim about my standard gearshift knob. My lawyer's senses were tingling. Could it be that Brenda genuinely had a blue Audi stolen? But it was a different model. And in her mind, my newer, more expensive S5 had somehow become its replacement, or a car she felt entitled to as cosmic compensation. It would explain the conviction in her delusion, if not the maliciousness of her actions. I needed something more concrete. I have a friend, a former colleague, who now works as a private investigator. I called him, explained the situation. He found it highly amusing, and asked if he could, strictly legally and ethically, see if there was any public record of an insurance payout or a police report for a stolen Audi linked to Brenda McTavish around that time. He said he'd make some inquiries. A few days later, he called back. "Mark, you are not going to believe this. Your HOA queen did indeed have an Audi A5, a 2016 model, dark blue, reported stolen about 18 months ago. It was recovered 3 weeks later, unfortunately stripped and torched. Total loss. She got a decent insurance payout." He paused. "And here's the kicker. I managed to get a copy of the police report she filed. In her statement, she mentioned a small distinctive scratch on the passenger side door handle and a custom silver gear shift knob she'd added. The smoking gun. Not just a smoking gun, but a full-blown howitzer. Brenda wasn't just randomly inventing details. She was projecting the specifics of her old, destroyed car onto mine. The scratch that didn't exist on my car, the custom gear shift that wasn't there, they were ghosts from her automotive past. This wasn't just delusion. It was a bizarre, almost pathological transference. Her entire claim, her 911 call, the HOA violation, it was all built on this sandy foundation of a misremembered, mourned vehicle. I now had everything. Her specific, false claims about identifying marks, cross-referenced with the actual details of her previous car, the video evidence of her unhinged behavior, witness testimony. The HOA's complicity. It was time to bring this to a head, not in a courtroom, but in a forum Brenda couldn't easily control or shout down. The next HOA general meeting. I checked the schedule. It was in 2 weeks, I sent another registered letter to the board, formally requesting 10 minutes on the agenda to address a serious matter of presidential conduct and potential liability to the association. I didn't elaborate. Let them wonder. Let Brenda stew. The stage was being set for a reckoning, and I intended to direct. The evening of the HOA general meeting arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation, at least for me. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine, primarily an amused Mr. Henderson, that Brenda had been alternately dismissive and vaguely threatening about my agenda item, telling anyone who'd listen that I was probably going to whine about my little fine and that she'd put me in my place. The meeting was held in the small, sterile community room attached to the management office, complete with uncomfortable folding chairs and bad fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. I arrived a few minutes early, dressed in a conservative suit, my courtroom armor, as my wife called it, carrying a slim leather briefcase. Inside was my meticulously organized file, copies of everything for each board member, plus a USB stick with the security footage and a PowerPoint presentation I'd prepared, because if you're going to dismantle someone's credibility, you might as well do it with bullet points and clear visuals. Brenda was already there, holding court at the front table with her board acolytes, Gary nodding dutifully, a couple of others looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. She was wearing a particularly aggressive shade of magenta silk, accessorized with what appeared to be an entire gold mine's worth of chains and bangles. She shot me a look that could curdle milk as I took a seat in the front row. About 20 other homeowners were scattered throughout the room, most looking resigned to another evening of tedious debate about sprinkler schedules or rogue holiday decorations. They were in for a surprise. After the usual droning through minutes and treasurer's reports, Brenda, with an air of theatrical impatience, announced, "Next on the agenda, Mr. Mark Stetson wishes to address the board." "Mr. Stetson, you have 5 minutes." She'd already cut my requested time in half. Predictable. I walked to the small lectern, placed my briefcase beside it, and smiled calmly. "Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, fellow homeowners. I'll try to be brief, but the gravity of the situation warrants thoroughness." I saw Brenda roll her eyes. "I am here tonight," I began, my voice even and clear, "to discuss a series of actions taken by our HOA president, Miss Brenda McTavish, which are not only deeply concerning but also expose this association to significant legal and financial liability." A few heads in the audience perked up. This sounded more interesting than water restrictions. I systematically laid out the events of that Saturday morning. My attempt to sell my legally owned Audi S5, Miss McTavish's sudden appearance, her baseless claim that my car was hers, and her subsequent 911 call falsely reporting a car theft in progress. Ms. McTavish alleged to the responding police officers, and to me, and to my potential buyer, Mr. David Porter, that my vehicle was in fact her vehicle stolen some time ago. Brenda couldn't contain herself. "It was my car. He's twisting everything." I recognized it immediately. It had a very distinctive scratch on the passenger door handle, and I distinctly remember the custom gear shift, she interjected loudly, her voice sharp with indignation. "Thank you for that clarification, Ms. McTavish," I said smoothly, letting her outburst hang in the air. "We'll return to those distinctive features shortly." I continued, detailing the police response, their confirmation of my ownership, and the subsequent, entirely unwarranted HOA violation notice I received, which laughably accused me of creating a public nuisance. I distributed copies of the violation notice and my formal letter of response to the board members, who accepted them with varying degrees of discomfort. Gary looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. "Now, regarding those identifying features," I said, turning a page in my notes, "Miss McTavish, you are on record, both on my security footage and in your interruption just now, claiming my 2018 Audi S5 Sportback has a specific scratch on the passenger door handle and a custom gear shift. Is that correct?" "Absolutely," she declared, puffing up. "Clear as day." "Interesting," I mused. "Because, as you can see from these high-resolution photographs of my vehicle, taken the morning of the incident, I held up large, clear prints. There is no such scratch. The door handle is pristine, and the gear shift is the standard Audi S-tronic unit, factory installed. I then addressed the room. But perhaps Miss McTavish is thinking of a different blue Audi. I clicked the remote for the projector I'd set up. On the screen behind me appeared a picture, a slightly grainy image sourced from an old social media post of Brenda's, showing her beaming beside a dark blue Audi coupe. Is this the car you might be remembering, Miss McTavish? This is, I believe, your former 2016 Audi A5 coupe. Brenda stared at the screen, her bravado faltering slightly. Well, it was blue. They look very similar. They are both blue Audis, yes, I conceded. However, this A5 coupe was reported stolen approximately 18 months ago, and, according to the official police report you filed at the time, Ms. McTavish, a copy of which I have here, I held up the document. You described your stolen A5 as having, and I quote, a small, distinctive scratch on the passenger side door handle and a custom silver gear shift knob you had personally installed. A collective gasp went through the room. Several board members were now staring intently at Brenda, whose face had gone from magenta to a pale, sickly white. Even Gary stopped nodding. It seems, Ms. McTavish, I continued, my voice measured but firm, that you have confused your tragically lost Audi A5 with my Audi's 5. You have projected the specific details of your former car onto my current car. While one might sympathize with the loss of a vehicle, that does not give anyone the right to falsely accuse another individual of theft, to summon emergency services under false pretenses, and to then use their position on the HOA board to harass and attempt to fine the innocent party. I then played a short, damning highlights reel from my security camera footage. Brenda's shrieking accusations, her emphatic description of the non-existent scratch, her dramatic 911 call. The audio was crystal clear. Brenda's own words, her own hysteria, filled the room. She sank lower in her chair, no longer meeting anyone's eyes. The actions of Ms. McTavish, I concluded, turning to the board, constitute defamation, slander per se, tortious interference with a prospective economic advantage, and malicious harassment. Her misuse of 911 is a matter the police themselves noted. Her subsequent actions in directing the HOA to issue a baseless violation notice against me amount to abuse of power. This pattern of behavior is unacceptable and creates a serious liability for this entire homeowners association, and by extension, for all of us homeowners who fund it. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. The room was silent save for the hum of the projector. Therefore, I stated, I formally demand the following. First, the immediate resignation, or, failing that, removal of Ms. Brenda McTavish from her position as president and from the HOA Board of Directors. Second, a full written apology from this board and from Ms. McTavish to me. Third, the immediate and permanent rescinding of the fraudulent violation notice and all associated fines. And fourth, I expect this board to take immediate steps to ensure that no resident is ever again subjected to such egregious abuse of authority by any HOA representative. Brenda finally found her voice, a weak, reedy version of its usual boom. You can't. This is an outrage. I was just trying to protect my property. Protecting what, Brenda? A voice called out from the back. It was Mr. Henderson. Your memory? It seems that's what's faulty here, not Mark's car ownership. Several other homeowners murmured in agreement. The tide had turned. The Queen was naked, her invisible scratches and phantom gear shifts exposed for all to see. The silence from the rest of the board was deafening. They knew. I knew. Everyone in that room knew Brenda's reign was over. The aftermath of that HOA meeting was swift and deeply satisfying. The board, minus Brenda, who had stormed out of the community room in a huff midway through Mr. Henderson's pointed question, immediately went into an emergency closed session. I didn't need to be a fly on the wall to imagine the panicked discussions. The evidence I presented was irrefutable, and the potential legal exposure for the HOA if they continued to back Brenda was immense. My quiet, meticulous, lawyerly presentation had done its job far more effectively than any shouting match could have. Within 24 hours, an email landed in every homeowner's inbox from the HOA vice president, a generally quiet man named Arthur, who always seemed overwhelmed. It announced, with carefully neutral wording, that Brenda McTavish had tendered her resignation from the positions of president and board member, effective immediately. For personal reasons, the collective sigh of relief across Willow Creek Estates was practically audible. A few days later, I received a formal, hand-delivered letter on official HOA letterhead. It contained a full, unequivocal apology from the remaining board of directors for the unfortunate incident and the distress caused. It confirmed that the violation notice against me had been rescinded and all records of it expunged. Tucked inside was a separate, rather terse note from Brenda herself. It wasn't exactly brimming with remorse, more like the kind of apology a cornered badger might offer, but it met the letter, if not the spirit, of my demand. I regret the misunderstanding concerning the vehicle. It read, "Good enough. I wasn't looking for her friendship, just an end to her tyranny." The community atmosphere changed almost overnight. It was as if a perpetual low-grade storm cloud had lifted. Neighbors were friendlier, more relaxed. Mrs. Gable brought me a plate of her famous lemon bars as a thank you. "We're all so grateful, Mark," she said, beaming. "She was becoming quite impossible. You know, she once tried to tell me my prize-winning roses were too vibrant for the neighborhood palate." Other little stories of Brenda's petty despotism began to emerge. Homeowners, now feeling safe to share their experiences without fear of retribution from the Rose Raider or the lawn-length legislator. As for my Audi S5, the story had a happy ending there too. I called David, the original potential buyer. I explained what had transpired, how the HOA president who'd accused us of grand theft auto was now the former HOA president. He was quiet for a moment, then chuckled. "You know what, Mark? That's one heck of a story. And frankly, anyone who can dismantle a neighborhood tyrant that clinically deserves to sell his car. If the offer still stands, and you can guarantee no more surprise SWAT teams or accusations of me being an international car thief, I'm still interested." We met the following weekend. The transaction was smooth, polite, and utterly devoid of drama. As David drove off in the gleaming Navara Blues 5, giving me a cheerful wave, I felt a sense of closure. I made a point of washing my Land Rover Defender in the driveway later that day, just a quiet, normal suburban activity. The new interim HOA president, Arthur, actually walked by and gave me a friendly nod and a "Nice truck, Mark." No accusations, no measuring tapes, no drama. Bliss. In the subsequent months, the HOA began a slow process of reform. Arthur, surprisingly, stepped up and seemed determined to run things more democratically and reasonably. They even asked for my input on redrafting some of the more ambiguously worded bylaws to prevent future abuses, a task I undertook with a certain grim satisfaction, ensuring clarity and fairness were paramount. My specialized skill set, usually employed for corporate contracts, had found an unexpectedly useful application in my own backyard. It's funny, the things that push you to your limit. I never set out to be an HOA giant slayer, I just wanted to sell my car. But Brenda, with her spectacular entitlement, and her delusion fueled by a long-lost Audi A5, had picked the wrong, meticulous, document-obsessed lawyer to harass. She consistently underestimated my patience, my resourcefulness, and my deep-seated aversion to bullies who abuse their sliver of power. Her downfall wasn't just about a car. It was about accountability, about the truth eventually, inevitably, coming to light, especially when it's well documented and presented with a PowerPoint. Brenda, I heard, moved out of Willow Creek Estates a few months later. Rumor has it she bought a condo in a high-rise downtown, one with valet parking only. Probably for the best, fewer opportunities to mistakenly claim ownership of other people's vehicles. I sometimes idly wonder if she's now accosting people on the street, insisting their designer handbag or their pedigreed poodle is actually hers. As for me, My Defender is happily occupying the garage, and I'm contemplating my next vehicle. Maybe something truly unique, like a vintage fire engine. Let's see an HOA president try to claim that one. What's the wildest HOA encounter you've ever had or heard of? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed this tale of suburban justice, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. You never know what craziness is brewing just over the meticulously manicured hedge.